Welcome to the fourth episode of this brand new series, American West Live. Every other week, we'll share a 10-minute slice of some of the best stories about how the American West came to be and California grew to become the fourth largest economy in the world. It all began in the mid-1800s, following an emigrant migration that began as a trickle, then became a massive movement fueled by desire for land, economic opportunities, and escaping hardships. This week, we focus on what is called the Horseback Party of Six, who went out ahead of the rest of the Stephens-Townsend-Murphy party upon reaching Truckee, now called Donner Lake, in November of 1844. Why they separated from the group and where they went to reach Sutter's Fort 25 days later has been subject to much speculation in history. We at History Expeditions aim to try and solve the mystery and reveal the finding of our extensive research in the upcoming Survivors and Heroes expedition, which will begin September 29th. We hope you enjoy.
Okay, let's dive into this. Try to picture it. It's November 1844. You're with the Stephens-Townsend-Murphy party, and you're just staring up at these huge snow-dusted mountains, the Sierra Nevada.
Yeah.
And winter is definitely coming. Supplies are running low, fast, and the whole wagon train is basically stuck, stalled out. It's a real moment of crisis.
Oh, absolutely. A genuine crisis. They'd made it so far west, but these mountains were just this massive immediate barrier. And the animals, the oxen, they were worn out. The weather was turning nasty. Waiting just wasn't really an option if everyone wanted to, survive.
Right. And so out of that pretty desperate situation came this decision. It must have felt like a huge gamble. 6 people. They were picked out for this really high-stakes push ahead on horseback. And they ended up being some of the very first non-Indigenous people, at least documented, crossing that specific part of the Sierra. We know them as the Horseback Party of Six.
That's what we're digging into today. Who were these 6 individuals? What were the specific circumstances that forced this dangerous trip? And maybe most importantly, how new research is really shifting our whole understanding of what actually happened on that crossing.
Because the story we've heard for ages, it's always been about just pure grit, right? These pioneers conquering the wilderness all alone.
That's a standard tale, yeah.
But this newer research, it seems to point to something else, something, more complex and maybe more human, actually. It suggests there was critical help, life-saving help that's just been missed or ignored.
It really is a revelation. It kind of forces us to rethink some of those bedrock myths about, westward expansion.
Yeah.
It shines a light on dynamics that are often just left out of the story.
So let's go back to that crisis moment you mentioned. The train is stuck. How bad was it, really? What did the sources tell us about just how dire things were?
Oh, they were in serious trouble. The original plan, whatever it was, had completely hit a wall. I mean, literally the mountains. Winter conditions were setting in way earlier, way harsher than they'd probably expected. And they just didn't have the resources. Not enough food for everyone, not enough feed left for the animals, and crucially, not enough time. They couldn't keep the whole group together and get everyone over before being completely trapped by snow.
And how was the decision made to split up? The sources are clear on this. It wasn't like, everyone got a vote.
No, not at all democratic. The leaders, Elisha Stevens and Caleb Greenwood, they were facing this grim reality. And they made a strategic call. A calculated one.
Sure.
They handpicked the 6 people they thought had the best shot at making a fast dash ahead on horseback. The goal wasn't, abandoning the others. It was a desperate move to improve the odds that someone could get through quickly, get help, and bring back supplies and fresh animals for the rest.
That totally reframes it. It's not impatience. It's a strategic risk for the whole group's survival.
Exactly.
So who were these 6? The ones chosen for what sounds like an incredibly dangerous task.
Right. So the 6 were Elizabeth Townsend, Ellen Murphy, Ellen's brothers, John and Daniel Murphy, Francis Delland, and Oliver Magnet. Sometimes you see his name spelled Magnan.
And Elizabeth Townsend. That's significant, right? One of the first non-Indigenous women to make that specific crossing, certainly on horseback like that.
Absolutely. Her being there is really notable for the time. And Ellen Murphy, too, a young, apparently quite bold Irish-American woman. The Murphy brothers, John and Daniel, they had some wilderness experience. Delland and Magnet were experienced teamsters, guys who knew about tough travel.
So a mix of skills.
Yeah, they were likely chosen for resilience, skill, and maybe just, sheer nerve.
And you mentioned earlier there's been some confusion or debate about what their mission actually was. Was it just get yourselves out or something more specific?
Yeah, the newer research especially pushes back hard on some older ideas. Like the idea was just a rescue mission launched after things went totally south, or that they were just impatient and took off.
Right.
The evidence now really points to it being a proactive decision, made by leadership before the main group was completely snowed in. Their specific job, their mandate, was get to Sutter's Fort urgently.
And why Sutter's Fort specifically?
That's where they could get help, secure those desperately needed supplies, get fresh pack animals, and then head back to help the rest of the wagon train get through. So their journey was absolutely for everyone's survival, not just their own.
That makes a huge difference in understanding why they went.
Good.
Okay, so they set off, the small group, with this critical objective. Now, what about the route they took? The traditional story makes it sound like this epic battle against totally unknown, brutal land.
It really does. The story you usually hear is they followed the Truckee River up towards where Lake Tahoe is now, then descended somehow via McKinney Creek, supposedly fighting their way through really rough country around the Rubicon River.
Sounds terrible.
Yeah, very difficult terrain. And then finally emerging, totally exhausted, down in the Sacramento Valley.
And how long did that supposedly take?
The usual figure is about 25 days. 25 grueling days, covering maybe 200 miles through mountain wilderness in winter. It's a story that really plays up their endurance, their pioneering spirit against this, unforgiving landscape.
This is where the new research comes in and basically says, hold on a minute.
Exactly. Researchers from a group called History Expeditions, they've done a huge amount of work trying to verify all this. It's not just digging in archives, though they did that too.
What else?
They spent tons of time out in the field, actually walking potential routes, using modern digital mapping, GIS systems, even using AI tools to help analyze historical accounts against the geography.
So what did all that digging, mapping, and analyzing turn up about the old story?
Well, the main takeaway is that the traditional narratives, it's incomplete. And in some really important ways, it's just wrong. There are errors about the actual path they took, the timing, and the most critical thing. It involves the complete erasure of essential help they received.
The erasure. Okay, so here we get to it. This overlooked crucial detail. Who gave them this help, this assistance that apparently made all the difference?
So the most, I'd say, dramatic finding from this new work is that the Horseback Party's survival seems to have fundamentally depended on guidance and knowledge from the Washoe people, the Wajee.
The indigenous nation whose ancestral homeland is this exact mountain range.
Precisely. The Washoe people, their ancestors, they'd lived in and traveled through these mountains for literally thousands of years, millennia. They had this incredibly deep, intricate knowledge of the Sierra Nevada, the best routes, where to find water, shelter, how to read the snow, the weather.
So the picture of them just hacking through virgin wilderness is wrong.
According to this evidence, yes. It seems they weren't blindly pioneering some brand new path. The research strongly suggests they were guided, that they were following established ancient Washoe trails.
Wow.
Think about what that implies. They were moving along routes that were known. They were used by people who understood this incredibly complex environment intimately.
And was it just about the trails themselves, or was there more interaction? Did they meet Washoe people?
It seems like it was more than just following paths. The picture emerging is that they likely moved from Washoe encampment to encampment. And at these points, they received critical, probably life-saving advice from Washoe individuals.
Advice like what?
Like where to find water sources in winter, which isn't obvious, where to find natural rock shelters. Crucial beta on navigating the really treacherous parts ahead. This wasn't just passive map following. It sounds like active assistance.
This just completely changes the texture of the story. It shifts it from, man versus wild to, successful navigation through shared knowledge, cross-cultural knowledge.
It fundamentally does. This indigenous assistance, which was just missing from the standard accounts for so long, it really looks like it was the difference between making it and, almost certainly not making it. The Sierra in winter is no joke. It's a labyrinth. That ancient Washoe knowledge, whether it was freely shared or maybe necessarily shared in the circumstances, it gave the party the key, the essential guidance they needed to have a fighting chance. Without it, it likely would have been a fatal maze.
It really cuts against that powerful American myth, doesn't it? The rugged individualist, the lone pioneer figure, taming the wilderness all by themselves.
Absolutely. It suggests that even these really iconic stories of frontier determination were often built on, or at least significantly helped by, interactions and knowledge from the people who already lived there, who already knew the land. Alliances, maybe sometimes unspoken or unrecorded.
And speaking of challenging old ideas, we should definitely circle back to the women in this group, Elizabeth Townsend and Ellen Murphy.
Yes, absolutely. Their presence on a journey this extreme is, well, pretty remarkable for the 1840s. The typical frontier narrative often didn't portray women as capable of this kind of physical endurance.
Right, they were supposed to be back at the wagon, fragile maybe. But here they are, riding alongside the men, facing blizzards, crossing freezing rivers.
Exactly. They weren't just tagging along. They were active participants, facing the same brutal conditions, contributing to the group pushing forward, surviving. Their courage, their resilience. It seems undeniable based on the fact they made it.
And what impact did their success have on those stereotypes?
Well, they basically smashed them. Their journey proved pretty definitively that courage and strength and sheer capability weren't, exclusively male traits on the frontier. They didn't just cross the mountains. They blazed a cultural trail, too, you could say, redefining what was thought possible for women heading west.
So, stepping back to the bigger picture, what was the immediate result of the Horseback Party making it through?
The immediate impact was huge. They survived, yes, but they also proved it could be done, that the Sierra could be crossed on horseback, even that late in the season. That information was vital for the main group still struggling behind them. It offered a viable path forward and reinforced the hope that help was actually coming.
And that proof, that established route, however difficult, it became pretty important later on, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely critical. This passage they navigated, it became a key part of what would eventually become the California Trail. The main highway for emigrants heading west, especially once gold was discovered. Thousands upon thousands used variations of these routes.
And connecting back to the Washoe role, this vital piece of the California Trail, this route that shaped so much of the American West, it wasn't new ground.
Exactly. That's the other layer. It wasn't a path just invented by the immigrants. It was fundamentally rooted in those ancient indigenous pathways, the trails the Washoe had used for centuries, for millennia. So a really key piece of the infrastructure for westward expansion was built, quite literally, on this unacknowledged foundation of indigenous knowledge.
So when you put all these pieces together, the crisis, the gamble, the individuals, the route, the hidden help, what's the real story here? It's clearly more than just a simple adventure tale.
Oh, it's so much richer. Yes, it's definitely a story about individual courage facing down incredible odds, no doubt about that. But it's just as much a story about smart, if desperate, strategic thinking by the leaders. It's about the quiet heroism of these 6 people doing something extraordinary. And crucially, it's about the absolutely indispensable role of cross-cultural knowledge and cooperation.
It really forces you to look again at that classic image of the lone pioneer, doesn't it?
It does. The deeper story here isn't one of isolation. It's actually one of connection, of alliance. Even if those alliances were temporary or maybe even unequal or went unrecorded for a long, long time, they were fundamental. They were what made this seemingly impossible journey actually possible.
So their legacy isn't just like carving a path on a map.
No, I think it's more than that. It's the model it provides. It shows how incredibly difficult things often get done, not just through brute force or individual will, but through a mix of courage, smart thinking, and crucially, being able to access and use the knowledge of those who already understand the challenges, the terrain, the way forward, especially when, everything's on the line.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other stories from history, stories we think we know as these tales of solitary achievement, how many might actually have these hidden roots in overlooked collaboration, unacknowledged help from other groups, other people?
That's a really important question, I think. For anyone looking at the past, how does acknowledging these hidden connections, these moments of vital exchange, like the Washoe guidance here, how does that fundamentally change our understanding? How does it change the stories we tell ourselves about how the West was settled or how any major historical undertaking was achieved?
Yeah. Definitely gives you something to think about next time you encounter one of those classic frontier narratives.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and invite you to learn more about the Stephens-Townsend-Murphy Party at our websites. We provide links in the show notes. Look for more American West Live deep dives every other week right here, or head over to our website at historyexp.org or YouTube channel at History Expeditions. From all of us at History Expeditions and the Sunnyvale Heritage Park Museum, we look forward to seeing you on the trail.